So to start off this deep dive, I want you to picture a living room. And right in the middle of this living room, I want you to just watch a toddler for about 5 minutes.
Oh, like just doing their own thing.
Yeah, exactly. Not in, some structured class, not on a playground that's been perfectly engineered by safety experts. Just right there on a completely ordinary living room floor. I want you to really slow down and just watch how they move.
It's honestly a masterclass in physics, isn't it? Like pure biomechanical exploration.
It really is. Every single joint is being tested.
Right. Every angle is being negotiated.
Exactly. The child reaches for a toy and, they miss. So they roll over, they get stuck under a chair leg, they twist their body.
They push up, they crawl.
Right. They pull themselves to a stand and then they fall right back down. They laugh and then they just try it all over again. And the thing is, there is no exercise program happening here.
Oh, definitely not.
There is no fitness tracker on their wrist, like logging their active minutes. There's no coach shouting encouragement from the sidelines. It is simply human movement in its absolute purest form.
Which means it's completely chaotic.
Yes, chaotic and wildly inefficient. But it is remarkably beautifully three-dimensional. Because, a child doesn't just move forward and backward.
Oh, no, they reach across their body. They rotate.
They twist, they crawl under things, they climb over things. They basically explore every single possible direction that gravity and their own joints will allow.
Because they're mapping their physical existence in real time. Like, the nervous system is actively building the blueprints for how to interact with a totally unpredictable world.
Right. And that child, if you give them enough decades and enough modernity, becomes Eleanor Marsh.
Right.
Now, Eleanor, she never really thought much about getting old. Not in a defiant way,
Yeah.
and not in a fearful way either. It simply never occurred to her as something that would happen to her.
She's just living her life.
Exactly. She wasn't someone you would consider a cautionary tale. You probably know an Eleanor. You might actually be an Eleanor yourself.
Sure.
She'd always done exactly what she wanted. She'd gone where she wanted. She reached for whatever she needed. And she did all of it without any negotiation or hesitation.
Because her body wasn't like a machine that she had to manage.
Right. It was simply the place where she lived.
And that brings us to the core of what we're doing today, because Eleanor didn't have some massive structural failure. She experienced a neurological forgetting.
Yes.
So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are pulling apart a really fascinating essay by the Finch Q team. It's titled, "When Did We Stop Turning?" And we are going to explore the quiet, almost invisible shifts in our movement vocabulary.
Which is such a great phrase, movement vocabulary.
It really is, because we need to look closely at how the modern world shapes our physical bodies, the underlying mechanisms of why we lose certain capabilities, and most importantly, how we can consciously reclaim what we've forgotten.
So to really understand that, let's return to Eleanor. She's 71 now, and we can see exactly how this forgetting manifests. It's just an ordinary afternoon, and she reaches for a jar on a high shelf.
Just a totally normal movement.
Right, a movement she has done literally 10,000 times in her life. But this time, her body hesitates.
Was she in pain?
No, she wasn't in pain. She hadn't fallen. She hadn't injured her shoulder. The jar was the exact same jar. The shelf was the exact same shelf. But something inside that reach had changed. It happened quietly, without any grand announcement.
Just a silent shift.
Exactly. To quote Eleanor directly, she said, "It was like I'd forgotten the move, like a word that's right there and then it isn't."
Wow. Like a word that's right there. That is so incredibly descriptive.
Isn't it?
Because shifting the framework from, structural damage to a neurological lapse, it forces us to look at the environment Eleanor is navigating, the environment all of us are navigating, really.
The modern world.
Yeah, we have to look at modern civilization. And I want to be really generous here, because modernity is an absolute triumph of convenience.
Oh,
the fact that we can communicate across continents without leaving an ergonomic chair, or, that groceries arrive perfectly packaged at our front door.
Or elevators. Elevators whisking us up 30 flights of stairs.
Exactly. These are extraordinary gifts. Convenience is not the villain of this story. Algorithms that anticipate our needs, remote controls, paved sidewalks. We celebrate these things as progress, and we should.
Yeah, nobody wants to give up the washing machine. Nobody wants to give up the elevator. We built this world for a reason. Comfort is a massive human achievement.
But and this is the big question, what happens to a physical system when it is no longer continuously required to adapt to an unpredictable environment?
Right.
Because for most of human history, daily life was a high variability environment. Movement wasn't categorized as, like, exercise that you scheduled for 45 minutes in a highly controlled gym.
It was just life.
Yes. Movement was the baseline of survival. You reached, you carried uneven loads, you climbed over fallen trees, you squatted to build a fire, you balanced on river stones. The physical environment basically demanded that your joints and your nervous system constantly solve these complex three-dimensional puzzles.
And the Finch-Q essay points out something really fascinating about how we categorize that movement today. Because biomechanically, the human body operates in three distinct planes of motion.
Right.
You have the sagittal plane, which is forward and backward movement. You have the coronal plane, which is side-to-side motion. And you have the transverse plane, which handles all the rotation and twisting.
Which we used to do constantly.
Exactly. When we lived in those high variability environments you just mentioned, we were moving through all three planes all day long. But, I mean, look at our modern environments. Look at your day-to-day listening to this. Many of us spend hours facing a glowing screen, positioned perfectly, directly in front of us.
It's all bright, though.
Our entire lives have basically been streamlined into a single plane of motion. We walk forward, we drive forward.
Always forward.
We look forward. We work forward.
That really lands when you say it like that.
Right. The diagonal and rotational movements that used to be a mandatory part of daily life, they just start disappearing from our daily requirements. I was thinking about this, and the best analogy I can come up with is your smartphone.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
You know how your phone has an operating system that silently closes background apps you haven't used in a while?
Yeah, to save battery life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's highly efficient. The system recognizes that you haven't opened a certain app in like 3 weeks, so it just shuts it down to conserve energy. I have to assume our nervous system is doing something similar.
It is doing exactly that through a biological mechanism called synaptic pruning.
Synaptic pruning.
Yeah, because the human brain is a highly metabolically expensive organ. I mean, it requires a massive amount of energy just to maintain the neural pathways that control your muscles.
That makes sense.
So if you are constantly twisting, reaching across your body, and navigating uneven terrain, the brain keeps those specific synaptic connections really robust. It wraps those neural pathways in myelin to make the electrical signals travel faster.
Keeping the apps open, basically.
Keeping them open and running perfectly. But if you stop demanding those specific movements, like if you eliminate the transverse and coronal planes from your daily life, the brain recognizes that those neural pathways are no longer necessary for your survival.
Oh, wow.
Right. To conserve energy, it physically weakens those synaptic connections. The operating system literally closes the background app.
Which brings us to a moment I actually want to invite you, the listener, to try out for yourself.
Yeah.
Seriously. The next time you're in your car, backing out of a parking space, I want you to notice how far you actually turn.
This is a great test.
Pay attention to the literal mechanics of your body in that specific moment, because most of us, we just rotate our eyes. Maybe we turn our neck a few degrees.
Right, because we rely on the backup camera.
Exactly. The sensors, the side mirrors. Very rarely do we actually rotate our entire torso, engaging our core and our spine to look behind us anymore.
Because the body always finds the minimum viable movement. When you use your backup camera instead of your spine, you are teaching your nervous system that spinal rotation is an obsolete function.
Telling it to close the app.
Exactly. And this ties into a vital concept called proprioception.
Proprioception?
Yes. It's essentially your body's internal GPS system. You have millions of these tiny sensors called mechanoreceptors, and they're embedded in your joints, your muscles, your fascia.
And what do they do?
Well, whenever you move, these sensors send high-fidelity spatial data back to your brain, telling it exactly where your arm or, your spine is in three-dimensional space.
Okay, so it's constantly mapping.
Yes. So when you stop rotating your torso to back out of that parking space, the mechanoreceptors in your spinal joints just go dormant. They stop sending data. Your brain's rich, three-dimensional map of your own body slowly degrades into a two-dimensional map.
And because the body is so incredibly adaptable, you don't even notice the map degrading. It compensates beautifully. The tricky thing about synaptic pruning and this proprioceptive loss is that the adaptation is entirely silent.
Completely silent.
You don't wake up on a Tuesday and announce that you've lost 12 degrees of spinal rotation overnight. The changes just accumulate so quietly.
Yeah.
Just take a breath and think about this shelf on the top cabinet that suddenly feels just a little less accessible.
Right.
Or take a breath and think about that quick turn to check your blind spot in the car feeling just a little stiffer.
Yeah.
Or the simple act of getting up from the living room floor taking just a few seconds longer.
Just slightly harder.
Or stepping off a curb and requiring just a little more conscious attention than it used to.
It's those tiny daily shifts.
But, this brings up a really crucial question. Because I can hear people saying, isn't this just what it means to get older? Like, is Eleanor really experiencing the neurological fallout of modernity, or is she just experiencing standard inevitable aging? Because, tissues change, cartilage wears down, we all age.
And that's a fair pushback. Aging is a reality of human biology. Tissues absolutely do lose elasticity over time, but the Finch-Q essay highlights that a massive part of this narrative is actually about exposure.
Exposure.
Yes, it is about the specific physical demands we expose our bodies to on a daily basis. Movement scientists and biomechanics researchers refer to this phenomenon as movement impoverishment.
Movement impoverishment, right.
It's such a striking term. It is a measurable narrowing of the range and variability of your motion. And crucially, this narrowing does not happen primarily from injury or disease. It happens from disuse.
Okay.
Think of a master concert pianist. A pianist who completely steps away from the instrument for 10 years. They don't lose their ability to play a complex sonata simply because their hands aged a decade.
Right, their fingers didn't just forget how to bend.
Exactly. They lose their proficiency because the highly complex, intricate motor pathways in their brain just weren't utilized. The synaptic connections faded. A language you never speak becomes harder and harder to recall.
That makes total sense.
And the neuroscience of motor learning operates on this exact principle. Use shapes the nervous system. Disuse reshapes it just as powerfully. You become incredibly proficient at the extremely narrow range of movements you practice every day, like sitting at a desk, walking on flat pavement, looking forward at a screen, and you become quietly incapable of the movements your modern environment no longer demands of you.
So the body isn't breaking down randomly. It is flawlessly adapting to the parameters of a smaller life.
That's exactly it. And when the brain's internal map of the body shrinks like that, it creates a really profound psychological cascade. Because when those mechanoreceptors we talked about stop sending clear, high-fidelity signals to the brain, it doesn't just result in physical stiffness. It triggers a highly specific response from the amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for processing threats.
So it triggers fear.
Yes, fear.
And I think we really need to slow down here because this is probably the quietest, most important part of this whole discussion.
It really is.
We aren't talking about the acute panic after a severe fall.
No, we are talking about the subtle, subconscious hesitation before one. Because the brain no longer has a clear proprioceptive map of how to navigate a twist or, a sudden diagonal reach, it begins to view those movements as inherently dangerous.
It doesn't trust itself.
Right. It develops this growing, unconscious preference for certainty. The nervous system begins making these silent, split-second decisions to avoid situations that feel even remotely unstable. It avoids the uneven hiking trail in favor of the paved walking path. It avoids the unpredictable step.
This is where the Finch-Q essay really stopped me in my tracks. Because there's a line that captures this psychological shift so perfectly, and I just want to sit with this for a second. They wrote, "The world became slightly smaller, not because it changed, but because the person navigating it did."
It's a heartbreaking realization, honestly. Because your movement options become fewer, you experience less movement variability in your daily routine. And that lack of variability leads to a tiny, almost imperceptible drop in confidence when you encounter a physical challenge. The amygdala fires a warning signal.
And then it just spirals.
Exactly. That drop in confidence leads you to restrict your movement even further, relying even more heavily on convenience and perfectly balanced environments.
And no single day in that cycle feels dramatic or life-altering. You don't even notice it happening.
No, you don't. Yet years later, the compound interest of that disuse is just staggering. For someone like Eleanor, someone who never considered herself frail, someone who just assumed her body would always be available to cooperate, this quiet narrowing arrived as a very specific kind of surprise.
Yeah.
It wasn't a medical crisis, but in some ways, the subtle realization that she was losing her physical independence was harder to process than a sudden injury. It was the realization that her fundamental relationship with gravity had been renegotiated without her consent.
But the beauty of Eleanor's story, and honestly the reason we are diving so deeply into this today, is what she does next. Because she didn't accept the renegotiation.
Roger, she didn't.
She didn't wait for a dramatic fall to force a change. She made a choice to intervene. Eleanor decided she wanted that physical language back.
She took agency over her own neuroplasticity. She spent 3 solid months working with a physical therapist. And her goal wasn't to, join a gym and start lifting heavy weights or running marathons.
Right. It was much more subtle than that.
Her goal was highly targeted. She wanted to relearn the forgotten vocabulary of human movement. She learned that her thoracic spine had largely stopped rotating. So she spent weeks specifically relearning how to reach across her body, deliberately crossing the midline to re-engage those dormant pathways.
She practiced moving diagonally.
Yes. She practiced turning to look behind her, forcing her torso to twist rather than just swiveling her hips or moving her eyes.
She was literally forcing the operating system to reopen the background apps.
That's exactly what she was doing. She was sending signals back up to the brain, demanding that it reestablish those synaptic connections and rebuild the proprioceptive map.
And her perspective on this whole process is just everything.
Well,
Because to Eleanor, none of that work felt like a clinical intervention. It didn't feel like fighting off old age. It felt like memory retrieval.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. It felt like trying to recall a complex French verb you haven't used since high school, right? Practicing it over and over until it finally rolls off the tongue again. She said, and I want to just leave a little quiet after this quote so it sinks in. She said, I felt like I was getting back something I didn't know I'd lost.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? I want to leave you with a provocative thought to mull over long after this finishes. Take a look at the room you are sitting in right now. Look at your workspace or your living room or, the interior of your car. Notice the engineering.
Look closely at it.
Everything around you is likely perfectly leveled. It is beautifully balanced. The objects you need most frequently are placed perfectly at arm's length. The temperature is controlled. It is an incredibly comfortable environment. But ask yourself this. Are you shaping your environment? Or is your perfectly comfortable environment silently reshaping your nervous system?
That is the question, because the physical vehicle that carried you this far will continue to carry you. That baseline assumption of resilience isn't wrong. It simply requires something in return. It requires us to consistently demand variability. It requires us to keep speaking the complex three-dimensional language the human body was evolved to understand. The question isn't how old you are.
No.
The question is how much of the language remains.
We're going to leave you with 5 seconds of quiet right here, just to think about that. It is never too late to start speaking that language again. Go out there, find some uneven ground, reach across your body, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.